Good morning, Morai v'Rabotai, Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We are on Daf Vav, Amud Bet, 22 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Chud Refuah Shlema for Daniel Moshe ben Farangis, Rachel Simcha bat Nahid, and today's Amud is also being learned the Ilu Nishmat Besalel ben Rafael Esther, dedicated by Mabudi family, and Esther bat Naftali Tzvi Levi, dedicated by Abraham family. This month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shea family and Mabudi families. Should be an ultimate schut for all their mishpachot. Amen. So we started a cheshbon of when exactly a year is, because we had a member, the third and final comment from Rava that we started yesterday, that you will be over on Bal Ta'acher. This is like the tail end of the discussions of Bal Ta'acher. And the last comment of Rava was, not only you will be over on Bal Ta'acher if you have 3 Yamim Tovim, 3 Chagim passed you by, and you still have not brought your Neder, your Nedava, your Korban, your Bechor, your Tzedakah, all of those things that we mentioned. But even if you had a year without 3 regalim, you're still going to be over on the mitzvah of Bal Ta'acher. So we went through, we said, wait, it's easy to have 3 regalim pass without a year. That's easy, right? You made the neder right before Pesach. Even if you require that the 3 regalim should be in order of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, it's very easy to have a neder right before Pesach. And then by 6 months, you already have passed 3 regalim, and obviously a year has now passed because you have Pesach right away after your neder. 50 days later, you have Shavuot, and then 6 months later, you have Chag HaSukkot. So that we get. But how can you have a year pass you by without having 3 regalim? Usually, every full cycle of a year has all the regalim in it. So that was the question we started grappling with. And the Gemara said, well, there is a machloket, Rebbe and Chachamim, that this really becomes very much related to, and this is in regards to what is considered Shana Tmima in the language of Pasuk. Now, the Pasuk is speaking about selling land in Eretz Yisrael. Normally speaking, when you sell land in Eretz Yisrael, it goes back Beyovel, right? It's a genius way of not having real estate tycoons and then no one else could buy land. After every 50 years, things go back to the main families, and therefore everything that you would buy within the 50 years would be priced based on the years that you have left for usage of it up until the Yovel. So it's a price control, is buying power. It is going back to communities as not a socialist, but it's like socialist not without the problems, right? It's a genius idea. Not the time for getting into that, but there is an exception to that. The exception is that in Bate Arechoma, in walled cities from the time of Yehoshua, if you sold a land, that would be a final and eternal sale. It would not go back in Yovel to the original owners. But you had a caveat that within a year, full year, after you sold it, you could back up and say, I don't want to sell. You could change your mind within a year after your sale and buy back the property and force that buyback and own it. But if you waited a whole year and you didn't buy it back, so then it will be latzmitut, the koneh oto, it will become eternally for the buyer and his family going forward. The pasuk that speaks about this is ve'im lo yigael ad melot lo shanat mimai. If it was not redeemed, if it didn't retract the sale until a full year, ad melot lo shanat mima, a full year, v'kam habayit asher be'ir asher lo choma, that house that it is in a walled city would now be Latzibitut lakoneoto, forever for the buyer, ledorota, for his generations to come, lo yetze bayovel, it will not go out back to the original owners, even in Yovel. Right? That's the pasuk in the Chumash. Now, when the pasuk says, ad melot lo shanat mima, until a full year, what does that mean? What's shanat mima? So surprisingly, even though that in Masechet Sukkah, in Aflamed, we said that Jews, we always count for lunar calendar, basically. Our calendar is based on lunar calendar, with a caveat that Pesach always has to be in Chodesh Nisan. It has to be in season of spring. So therefore, we make sure to add that 11 days that you lose every year from a lunar calendar, we kind of like make it up every 3 years. We make it up with an extra Adar in a Shana Me'uberet, in a leap year, right? But we usually count from the moon. Here, Rebbe says, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, this is a solar calendar year. It's a 365 day year, Shana Tmima. That's what it means. Chachamim say, no, mapitom. It's not talking about that. It is talking about a lunar calendar, Jewish calendar. So says the Gemara, wait, according to Rebbe, it's easy. According to Rebbe, that a year is considered 365, it's easy to find that you could have a scenario that a year passes without having 3 regalim. Because if you made a neder immediately after Pesach, so imagine, let's call it 23rd of Nisan. 23rd of Nisan, you made a neder, and the upcoming year is a Shana Me'uberet. So you're not going to have the next Pesach until a good 380 days later, and 365 already passes a one year period according to Rebbe. So you could have a whole year pass without you having 3 regalim. So that we understand. But according to Chachamim, that we follow a Jewish year, how can you have that? That's where we left off. So it says, the Gemara, again, 22 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, the line starts with Malia, Regalim, Lo Malu. So says the Gemara, according to Rabbanan, who disagree with Rebbe, how do you have a year pass when they hold the year is a full Jewish year without having 3 regalim? That sounds like a check. It's an impossibility. The Gemara says, no problem. Kedetani Rab Shemaya. You could have it like Rab Shemaya. How is that? Rab Shemaya says, "Ba'atzeret Shavuot pe'amim he pe'amim shisha pe'amim shiva." Yom Tov of Shavuot is the only Yom Tov, basically, the only Chag that doesn't have a date on the calendar. The way you figure out when Shavuot is, you count 50 days from Pesach, right? So that makes you subject to how long the months are, says Rab Shemaya. Sometimes both Nisan and Iyar could be Maleh, which means will be months of 30 days each. So if both of them are 30 days, then when you count the 49/50 days, your Shavuot would end up being on 5th of Sivan. If both of them are Chaser, both of them are 29-day months, then obviously you got to be 2 days ahead in Sivan. So your Shavuot will be in 7th of Sivan. And if one of them is Maleh, one of them is Chaser, that means one is 30 days and the other one is 29 days, then you'll do like what we have, that it would be the 6th of Sivan. So says Rav Shemaya, Shavuot depends, sometimes 5th, sometimes 6th, sometimes 7th. It's variable. Every year could be different based on the Chodashim. Now, we have a disagreement with this, which we will see in just a moment. But Rav Shemaya says, Aketzad. How does this work? Shenehen melein, if both Nisan and Iyar are maleh, then it's going to be Hamisha, and the 5th of Sivan is going to be Chag HaShavuot. Shenehen chaserin, if both of them are chaser, then it's going to be Shiva, right? You're 2 days ahead. So you will have Chag HaShavuot on 7th of Sivan, Echad Maleh, Echad Chaser. If one of them is Maleh, one of them is Chaser, then obviously you will have Chag HaShavuot on 6th day of Sivan. Now, what does this mean? Our Tana, right? Because according to this, you could have this cheshbon. Man Tana de Palig Alet de Rab Shemaya. Who is the Tana that disagrees with Rab Shemaya that you could have? Because again, according to this, if you have a neder that you made, imagine we go 3 regalim you need. So you have right after Chag HaShavuot, you make a neder, and your Chag HaShavuot fell to be on 5th of this year, fell to be on 5th of Sivan. So the day after Chag HaShavuot, on 6th, you make a neder, right? And next year happens to be Chag HaShavuot falls to be on 7th of Sivan. So you could have a full Jewish year with all its months pass, and you haven't yet gotten to 3 regalim, right? That's what the Gemara is saying. According to Rav Shemaya, I could have a year pass without having 3 regalim passed. So therefore, the Gemara says, that's what Rava meant. When Rava said you could be over on Bal Ta'achar if you make a neder and a year passes, even though that 3 regalim have not passed, it could be speaking, even according to Chachamim, that you need a full Jewish year to be called a year. According to Rebbe, is easy, right? Because it's a year of 365. But even according to Rabbanan, that they say a year is always a Jewish calendar year, you can still have this mitziut that 1 year, this year, Shavuot is on 5th, next is going to be on 7th. So if this year on 6th, the day after Shavuot, you made a neder, if the whole full year passes, next year on 6th of Sivan, it's not Shavuot yet because Shavuot is tomorrow. It's Erev Shavuot. And you already are over on Baltachas. That's what Gemara is saying. Now, when we spoke about the 5 shitas, right? You remember, everyone remembers, right? 5 shitas that we had in Daf Dalet, Amud Aleph going into Amud Bet, right? We never said, like Rava, right? We never said that if a year passes without 3 regalim, that would have been an amazing 6th shita, right? We said it's either one chag passes year over on Baltacher, that's Rabbi Meir, right? Or 3 chagim, that's Tarakama, or 3 chagim in order, that's Rabbi Shimon, right? Or 2 chagim, that's Rabbi Yaakov, or Chag HaSukkot only, that's Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, right? Why wouldn't it be 5 plus 1 shita, that even if you have no 3 chagim, but the whole full year pass, you'll be over on Baltacher. So that Braita in Daf Dalet Amud Bet obviously is disagreeing with this over here. So who is the Tana over there that disagrees with this? Rav Shemaya says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Man Tana de Paligale de Rav Shemaya. Who is the Tana who disagrees with Rav Shemaya? Acherimi. It's Acherim. Who's Acherim? Rabbi Meir. How do we know that? Oh, because Tosafot in Masechet Sotah says this, right? In Daf Yud Bet, everyone knows it, so it's nodding their heads. Sotah, Yud Bet, right? But this really is based on the Gemara in Horayot, Daf Yud Gimel, right? The Gemara in Horayot says this is kedai to know there was a feud between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was the Nasi at the time, right? And there was an element that was viewed as a disrespect to the Kavod Torah, and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel made it that from there on, Rabbi Meir is not going to be mentioned by his name; is going to be mentioned as Acherim, the other ones, right? The other ones say, now this is not the only shita. There's also another argument to be made based on the Gemara in Masechet Sagiga, that's it, Vav Tetzvayin. There the Gemara says that Rabbi Meir was a staunch supporter and a loyal student, disciple of Elisha ben Avuya. Now, Elisha ben Avuya after the story of going up to the spiritual worlds together with Rabbi Akiva ben Azai and ben Zuma, he became cuckoo, right? He went off the path of Torah. The Gemara says, Arba alu lepardes, nichtasu lepardes. 4 people entered um, the high worlds of spiritual reality of the Torah, understanding, and the only one that came out intact, nichnas leShalom, v'yatza leShalom, was Rabbi Akiva. Then Zuma ben Azai, one of them died, one of them became crazy, and Elisha ben Avuya went off the path, unfortunately. So it was such a shock for people. Imagine Rabbi Meir, who was Meir Enecha Chaybet. The Gemara in Horayot says his name was not Meir, lo Meir Shemo ela Nehorai Shemo. So why do we call him, nickname him Rabbi Meir? Shai Meir Enecha Chachamim beTorah. He was so great that he would light up the eyes of Chachamim in Torah. The Gemara says he was such a creative mind that people didn't know when he's serious, when he's just exercising, right? You could take a sheretz, right, and prove to you in 49 different ways that this is tahor, and vice versa. You could take something tahor, prove it to you that's tameh, and you'll just be dazzling. That's Rabbi Meir, and he was a student of Elisha ben Avuya to the degree he couldn't let go of him. The Gemara says only he could do such a thing, right? Rimon matzah, he found like a pomegranate. He took the inside, he trashed all the intricacies of the garbage that was mixed with Elisha ben Avuya, so he perhaps could do that, right? Whole thing. After his death, they would not let him go to Bet Midrash of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem would say, Shemua, Eliyahu Navi said, Hashem says the Torah from the mouth of all the Chachamim besides Rabbi Meir, because he learned with this person, Elisha ben Avuya, right? Like, it's a whole story over there. Whole story. Gemara says, like, on Shabbat, they're walking, Elisha ben Avuya is on a horse. Horseback is Asura on Shabbat, right? And Rabbi Meir is so fatumult, he's so busy learning from him, he forgot that he had reached the Tchum Shabbat. But who didn't forget? Elisha on the horse, who is being with Chalash Shabbat, he's counting with the steps of his horse as he's teaching Torah, and he stopped his horse and says, you just reached your Tchum Shabbat, you go back. And he tells him, says, you go back too, please, right? Figuratively, he says, do Baal Shai. Says, I heard about Kol. That says, Shuvu Barim Shovavim Chutz Ma'acher. Everyone could do Tshuva besides me. Long, poignant story, very difficult story, perhaps. But one of the reasons that Rabbi Meir is called Acherim is because he learned from Elisha Acher. The people were so surprised when he came and he was Mechalel Shabbat right after the story of the Pardes, and they say, "Oh, Acherhu, this is somebody else. This looks like Elisha ben Avuya, but can't be Elisha ben Avuya." That's how shocking this was. So his nickname became Acher, the other one. So the Rabbi Meir, who learned from him, and this we see that it affected his Torah. That Hashem didn't want to say Torah from his name and so on, because he learned. You have to be careful who you learn from, right? The pasuk says, "Ki siftesh kohen yishmeru da'at Torah yebakashu mipiu ki marach Hashem tzvakotu." And the Gemara dashes, "Im harav domeh lemarach Hashem." If the Rebbe is like Malach Hashem, then yebakashu Torah mipiv. Then you should learn Torah with him. If it's not like Malach Hashem, you should not. It's asur to learn from somebody that is not like Malach Hashem. Shiva Zatzal used to say, what's the pshat? Malach Hashem says Malachim are called omdim, right? Malachim are called omdim. V'natati lecha mahalachim ben haomdim ha'ele, says the pasuk. The Haftarah you read, and omed means they're not concerned about their own growth. If you want to be a real teacher, you have to be concerned only about the student. What's good for the student? No ulterior motive of what's good for me. What do I want to learn right now to help my growth? It's so nice, but it's not a real teacher. A real teacher is someone that's completely dedicated to the growth of the students. Now, we went on tangents. It's just confusing because Rabbi Meir is such a revered personality in Torah. Say it's important. Yeah, of course it is. But then at the same time, it's a derogatory. It's not a derogatory thing. Well, Rabbi Meir, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is medaktekim tzadikim kechut ha'sa'ara. Hashem is very, very careful. The bigger you are, the more expected from you, right? So if he has a little impurity in his Torah because he learned from someone like that, So it has to be fixed. The Gemara in Chagiga there goes through a whole thing of Rabbi Yochanan said, "Well, it's possible that someone was among us and they're not now letting him in thing. They fixed it afterwards. A whole story there of how this was so-called fixed. But again, certain things are needed for when you're talking about Torah. The purity of Torah is the actual currency in our nation. It has to be like that. It has to be pure, right? We spoke about this when we spoke about the Kidei HaMishkan. The two things they have to be through and through gold, right? It can't be gold plated, and also they have to be one piece. Is the two elements of Torah, menorah and the Kipporet. The Torah has to be through and through, and it has to be tocho keboro, like the Gemara said in Masechet Brachot Daf Kafchet, right? The whole story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rav Azaria. It has to be tochol kebora. It has to be consistent. So if you find that problem, which the Gemara explains, then it follows with. It doesn't mean that Rabbi Meir is disqualified. It just means that we mention it, but we mention it with carefulness. That this is you have to be. And the Gemara itself says, Rabbi Meir could do that. We can't do it, right? We have to be way more careful in the way we choose our rebbeim and so on. So that's the Gemara. Now, again, we went on a little tangent over here. So Montana de Paligale the Rab Shemaya is Acherim, is Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, we learned in Braita Acherim Umrim Ben Aseret Aseret and Ben Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah Ela Dalet Yamim. Every Yom Tov that you take, whether it is the Aseret Shavuot or Rosh Hashanah, from this year to next year is 4 weekdays apart. That means if this year Rosh Hashanah is going to fall on Shabbat, next year Rosh Hashanah is going to be 4 days later, which is going to be on Wednesday, and the year afterwards is going to be 4 days later, and that is going to be Sunday. That's how it works, right? How did he figure? Because Rabbi Meir, I'm explaining the backdrop of this. Rabbi Meir holds that the Jewish calendar, the way it works is every other month is Male, every other month is Chaser. That means one Male, one Chaser. 130 days, 129 days. The next one 30, the next one 29, and so on and so forth. So if you add that up, you'll have 6 months that are 30 and 6 months that are 29, right? I see the back of the envelope calculations everyone is doing. So you end up with 354 days. Now, if you divide that by 7, which is the weekdays, you'll end up with 50 full weeks and another 4 days, right? So if Rosh Hashanah this year is on Shabbat, next year it will be 50 full weeks later and plus 4 days. So Rosh Hashanah, I could already tell you, if Rosh Hashanah starts on Shabbat this year, it will be on Wednesday next year, and it will be on Sunday the other ones. Now, we don't pass it like that. We'll get to that. But that's the shita of Rabbi Meir. Okay? Every Jewish year is 354 days. Now, if it's a Shana Me'uberet, because obviously Rabbi Meir has to deal with Shana Me'uberet, right? It has to deal with Shana Me'uberet because we have to remember, Pesach has to be always in Nisan. It has to always be in Chag Moed, Chag Aviv, in the season of blossoming and so on, which is springtime. So if you have Shana Me'uberet, it says the Gemara, Ve'im Haita Shana Me'uberet Chamisha. Why? Because if you Shana Me'uberet, you have second Adar. And Chodesh Ibur is always Chaser. So it's how many days? 29 days. It's always Chaser. 29 days is how many weeks? 4 weeks? No, 7 days. So 4 weeks and 1 day. Right? So the year of Shana Me'uberet would be 54 weeks and how many days? 5 days. Right? You had 50 weeks and 4 days. Now you add 4 weeks and 1 day. So therefore, if next year is going to be Shana Me'uberet, if this year's Shana was on Shabbat, it's going to be now on Thursday, right? So that's Shita Rabbi Meir, that there's no difference between This year and next, but 4 days. And it's Shana Moberet, 5 days, says the Gemara. So if you say that, there's no such a thing as Shavuot ever falling on any other day but 6th of Sivan. If every month is alternating 30, 29, 30, 29, 39, you always will have Chag HaShavuot fall on Vav Sivan like we have it, right? So that's the Tana that disagrees with Rav Shemaya, who holds that it could be 5th, 6th, or 7th. It can never be 5th. It can never be 7th. It always will be 6th, according to Rabbi Meir, right? Do the math. If you have every month, every other month is Maleh Chaser, Maleh Chaser, Maleh Chaser, Maleh Chaser. So always Nisan and Iyar, one of them will be Chaser, one of them will be Maleh. And we just said that if one of them is Chaser, one of them is Maleh, Shavuot is going to fall on 6th, right? So that's the Tana that disagrees with Rav Shemaya. Fine. Now, the very tail end of the whole sugya about Tacher is two amazing questions. Yoresh Ma'u. How about a son? If a father made a neder of bringing a korban, the korban is sitting in the barn. You have to take it to Yerushalayim. Then the father died. Now the son yarshined the korban, yarshined everything else, yarshined the korban. What's the halacha? Can you eat it on a Tuesday afternoon? No, he has to bring it as a korban. It's a korban. It's kochim, right? But how about Baltacher? Does he have a Yisura Baltacher? As Sfat Emet writes, this is important to note. Sfat Emet writes, there is no question that he doesn't yarshin the same Baltacher as the father. That's not the question. In other words, if the father only had, another 5 days left, and now his father just died, and he's sitting Shiva, it doesn't matter. He has to bring it. He doesn't yarshin the clock of the father. He has his own clock that it's going to start, right? But the question is, do I even have the whole concept of Baltacher or not? Maybe not, because I didn't make the nether. You made the nether. You shouldn't have made the nether. It's my fault that you made the nether, that I'm going to be hooked on. I have a policy. I never make nedarim. You made it. You deal with it. Or maybe I can't do that. Maybe because I have to bring this korban, right? It's my korban to bring, right? Now it's my assets and it's kochim, so I have to bring this as a korban. So once I have to bring it, maybe I'm bound to a certain clock automatically. So says the Gemara. Let's see. This is just amazing. What's the halacha of Baltacher for Yoresh? Kitidor neder amarachmana. The pasuk, this whole hararam of the past two dapim started with one pasuk. You remember it? Kitidor neder Hashem Elokecha. If you make a neder for Hashem, lo ta'acher leshalemo. The whole Isur of Baltacher is said starting with Kitidor neder. If you make a neder, I didn't make a neder. My father made a neder, right? So I'm off the hook. And this fellow has not made a neder, so therefore let him be off the hook. Or maybe maybe when we talk about the mitzvat aseh, Baltacher is mitzvat lo taseh, right? But in the mitzvat aseh that everyone agrees that you have, it says what? Ubata shama ve'avetim shama. It's talui on who brings it. It depends on who is going to be actually bringing the korban, not the one that made the neder. So maybe, just maybe, because that is my obligation, I automatically get the clock obligation also, says the Gemara. So says the Gemara, V'hami chayev tashma. So let me bring a proof. The Tani Rabbi Chia said, Me'imach, when the pasuk says in that same first pasuk of the obligation of Baltacher, it says ki darosh yidrashenu Hashem Elokecha me'imach. Hashem is going to demand it from you. Who's the you? Son. Who's the you? Says the Gemara, me'imach prat leyoresh. It's from you, the one that kitidor neder, the one that made a neder. The Torah says Hashem is going to demand it from you. Why does the pasuk have to say from you? Just say Kitaroshi Deshura Hashem. From who? Oh, if it wouldn't say from you, I would say from whoever owns it. So if you die, your son would be demanded from. But it says from you to tell you, if only from you, not from your Yoresh. If you die, your son does not have the clock. Right? It's amazing, pretty straightforward. With one problem. Everyone's eyebrows went up because everyone remembers that a half ago we said Me'imach is coming to teach you Leket Shichaupea. Right? You remember how we dissected every word in that pasuk? And we learned those 16 items mentioned in Daf Dalet Amud Aleph, the last line, from this pasuk of Kititor Lashem Elokecha. And from the word Me'imach, we learned Leket Shichaupea. Right? Matanot Anim. That's with you. So Gemara asks that question. So we learned this, right? Of Amud Bet, just a daf ago, that is referring to leket. The Gemara says no. V'kari be me'imach. That you learn from imach. We don't need the mem. That from you Hashem is going to demand it. You could have just said Kitarosh Hashem imach. So from the fact that it says me'imach, it's going to teach you from you. Hashem demands it, not from anybody else. Fine. So we have that. That's clarified. So if a person's father passes away, he himself does not have that obligation. And now we have only one thing left, and that is this is really fantastic because it's going to talk about husbands buying clothing and everything for their wife, making them happy. What's the definition of the mitzvah of simchat regel for men and for women? Eating meat, not eating meat, all of that is going to be discussed, B'ezrat Hashem, in the next shiur.